There were also big conversations about gun violence and climate change, and some of the candidates answered their questions in Spanish.
Nightside's Phil Buck watched the entire debate at a watch party in St. Petersburg. Phil, there were mostly younger people there. It was trending young, at least. Did they hear what they wanted to hear from candidates?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on who you ask, and I think it depends on what they wanted to hear. But for the most part, from the people I talked to in the room tonight, they weren't so much interested in hearing about the issues. It was how these candidates plan on addressing those issues that they wanted to hear about. I mean, we all know, immigration, guns, healthcare, student debt, these are the issues that everyone's going to be talking about throughout this campaign. What are you going to do about it? That's what these voters wanted to hear here tonight.
Because a lot of things that the Democratic candidates are saying are just Democratic ideals, so a lot of them aren't getting as specific as I would like.
A lot of talk about abortion, a lot of talk about better health care, which is something I definitely agree with. I like to talk about making it a little bit easier to go to college, be able to pay for college.
And it wasn't just the issues that caught the crowd's attention. People definitely took notice when some of the candidates started speaking in Spanish.
La representación y cada voz necesitamos escuchar. La situación ahora es inaceptable. Este presidente ha atacado.
How did that come across to you? Did it seem authentic or did it seem like a performance?
I did wonder how long they had practiced those specific lines. I mean, I hear that they do speak Spanish fluently, but they came in prepared.
Now, of course, there were a few technical issues during the debate as well. The screen would freeze or they'd have to go to commercial break and the crowd would kind of go, oh, but they really didn't seem to mind too much about that. There was a good energy in the room here tonight. They did seem to have a better turnout than they were anticipating. And keep in mind, they're coming back here to do it all over again tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we have another 10 candidates, and this really was kind of the undercard in this fight. Tomorrow night we have the two heavyweights in this primary battle. Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden will both be on the stage.
People will certainly be tuned in for that. I'm sure the watch party will be going on just like it was tonight there, Phil.